Loading data. In this video, we're going to load some data into our model. So without any further ado, let's jump over into live demo time. So we've opened up QlikView. The first thing we're going to do is create a new model. So to do that, let's click on that paper icon over there in the far left. When you do that the first time, you get this Getting Started wizard. We're not going to look at that at all, so I'm going to close that off. And in fact, if you want to make it disappear forever, just click it in the bottom left-hand corner. But for now, I'll just close it. And you can then see our canvas where we're going to create our dashboard later on. Let's save this model before we go any further. So let's click Save. I'm going to call it Chapter 2, but please feel free to call it something more meaningful. Before we go into the script editor, I'd just like to make a couple of changes to some settings which will be useful later on. So I'll click on Settings and go to User Preferences. In the General tab, let's turn on Keep Progress Open After Reload. This means when we load the data, we can have a look at what's been loaded and where. And in the Save tab, let's turn on Save Before Reload. So if we make any mistakes, we don't lose our work. So we click OK. One more change before we go into the script editor. If we right-click in the blue space and turn on the Design toolbar, which is this toolbar along here, as we'll be using that later on. Once you've done that, if you go into the script editor by clicking on the pencil icon, we'll have a look at writing some code. This is the script editor. As you can see, there's already some script being written. These are what are called system variables and are set depending on where your machine is configured for. Things like what the months are called and what the dates are called and what our format for dates is. Not something we need to worry about, so we'll just accept the fact they're there for now. We're going to load some data. Now, on the Data tab, on the left-hand side, you've got the options for connecting to a database. We're not going to do that on this course as we're loading from Excel. But just to make you aware, you can connect to any database via OLE or ODBC. There are also connectors you can get from Qlik for things like SAP, Salesforce, and there is a REST connector which allows you to connect to web APIs. For all of them, you click Connect, provide the credentials required, and then select the tables you want to load. But for now, we're going to focus on table files. Before we click on that button, let's just turn on the relative paths so that we get a relative rather than an absolute path to the table. So click Table Files. If you navigate to the source data directory and click on Store Sales, and that's the first table we're going to load. So if I click Open, the wizard appears. 10 different types of tables you can see from the list on the left, and it's recognized that this one is Excel. The table it picks up is the sheet name, so a table equates to a sheet. And there's only one sheet with any data in this one, so it's picked it up automatically. But there is a drop down if I wanted to pick different sheets. Header size allows me to rule out the top X number of lines if they're not related to the actual data. So things like headers, dates and times and titles and things like that can be ignored. And the labels, whether they're embedded or not. Generally, Qlik works out that they're embedded labels, but it's always worth checking that that's happened, and if not, click the drop down and change the options. Now I could just hit Finish at this point, and that's all I would need to do. But for now, for this one, we're going to have a look at the other options that are available to us. So I'm going to click Next. And you can see here, there's an Enable Transformation step. And what this allows us to do is take a spreadsheet or a table of some description. It doesn't really look like a traditional table with rows and columns, and try and make it look like a table. So I'm going to click on it now and show you the options available. So Garbage allows us to delete particular columns. Not something I feel you need to do in the wizard. We'll do that in the script later on. Fill allows us to fill in any blank cells with either the values from the row above or the row below. So you might, for instance, only have year when the year changes, and then you can fill that down into each row. Column allows us to create a new column. Not something, again, we need to do in here. We can create new fields in our script, and we will do a lot of that. Unwrap allows us to take the right-hand side of a table and put it at the bottom of the left. Something you may very rarely need to do with HTML tables. And rotate allows us to turn columns into rows and rows into columns. So if I click next, we then got our options that are available to us. We can let the wizard build a where clause for us, but we're not going to do that. We'll use where later in the script in later videos. And also in later videos, we'll look at the cross table option, which allows us to unpivot a pivot table. So I click next, and you can see there the script it's going to write for us. So if I click finish, and you can see there's our script put into the script editor. And we're going to load these fields from this table. Just have one more change to make, because at the moment this command here, directory semicolon, means that this table will be called whatever it's called in Excel, which is sheet 1. And that's probably a little bit misleading as a name of the table. So instead of directory semicolon, we're going to give the table a name. I'm going to call it fact, and then put a colon to say that's the end of that statement. So this table will be called fact. So if I then hit the reload button to reload my data, and you can see there it's loaded in my 10,000 records. So if I hit close, we then get this pop-up which allows us to create list boxes. We'll have a look at list boxes separately later on, so for now we'll just click OK. And one final thing, we're just going to have a look at the table viewer to see what we've got. So the table viewer, there's a little icon up here. So if I click on that, we'll then see our table. And we'll also see when we load later tables how they join to this one. So I hover over fact. You can see there it tells me I've got 10,000 rows and 8 fields. So I click OK. We've now loaded our first table into QlikView.